Welcome to Uncommons. I'm Nate Erskine-Smith, and we are here at Peach Coffee Co. in Burlington because after a bit of a hiatus, we are back with the Uncommons podcast with one of my favorite parliamentarians. I'm joined by Karina Gould. Thanks for joining.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I've come to you, but I'm really interested actually in starting out figuring out what you're up to next, because you have lived a life in politics where you've done big things, but around the cabinet table mostly. And while I'm sure there are some frustrations with not being back there, there's a lot of freedom with as a parliamentarian with what you get to do. And I've had 10 years of maybe less restrained freedom than others, but freedom. And you get a lot done actually in your own way. And you are a doer and you like getting things done. So what do you have on the agenda coming up?
Yeah, so look, I mean, I wouldn't trade my time in cabinet for anything. It was great.
Of course.
And we got great things done, like childcare, which I'm really proud of. But you're right, there is a certain amount of freedom that comes with being a backbench MP that I never got to experience, and now I get to. I'm really concerned right now with a couple of things. I mean, obviously, being from Burlington, I'm focused on the trade war that we're having with the United States. You don't have to look too far to look to the steel mills and the auto sector. It's kind of around here. And people depend on that here. So that's been a big focus for me advocating internally. But then like this is something that you and I have actually been working on for a really long time is online harms and everything that comes tech and AI. I started to be concerned about deep fakes and these kinds of things when I was Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Yeah, of course.
Back in 2017 and what we saw with the US presidential election and Russian foreign interference. And so I did some work then, but setting up Canada's response to cyber interference in our elections. But what we're seeing now is totally, it's so much more pervasive. And I just don't feel like we as a country or the world is a fix to dealing with what we're having right now. And so those are some of the things that I've been focusing on. And
what do you think it could look like? So there is sometimes a bit of a utopian view where it's great economic opportunity, and this will unlock the promise of efficiency in so many things, and then there's undoubtedly some truth to that there is opportunity, right? And yet there's also safety considerations, especially our kids are growing up online, and what will the future look like for them with that technology? There are job considerations and what the displacement will look like. This comes up if you're on campus. This will be one of the questions you get. But taking that safety focus as a starting point, your kids are how old now?
2 and 8.
Okay, so mine are 9 and 6, and they are screen focused in many ways. And so making sure that when they are having that time, that it is safe for them, and we're doing right as parents, but also as society. And it shouldn't really be left up to parents to individually police absolutely everything. We do need rules that are fit for purpose as our kids live their lives online and we live our lives online. We have had different legislative attempts at this over time. The EU is further down the road on regulation than we are, certainly. We've gotten mixed signals at times from the federal government today of it's all promise, and then, well, no, we're going to see some regulation, but I don't have a fulsome picture yet of where we go. What is it you want to see? What is it you want to work on?
Yeah. So, I mean, a bunch of things. I mean, I think there's kind of like, there's a bunch of different buckets, right? There's the people that are the AI skeptics, and then there's the people that are like the AI champions. And then there are the people in the middle who are kind of like, there's probably some really good benefit. And there's
how do we make the most of it?
and
And
there's probably
counter concerns. Yeah.
really bad stuff too. I was just reading over the weekend at Public CVO's latest essay that kind of goes through all the perils of AI and what's coming. And what I'd like to see is us kind of apply the standards that we already have to the tech space, right? Like I just don't understand why it's okay and, people don't face legal consequences when they put out deep fakes of people, or when they're putting out, nudes on Grok of people. Like those are things that are like not legal to do.
Correct.
In like the analog world. So I don't really understand why they accept it in the digital world. And, my thing has been, I'm not the expert here, but my thing has always been like, if we agreed that these things are not okay, like just apply those online as we apply them offline. And for some reason we haven't.
There is an enforceability challenge. It's I sued someone successfully for defamation,
Yeah.
and it was in small claims. And I said this to the judge. I said, it's not about the damages. I'll give the $33,000 to charity that works to address misinformation, disinformation, politics. It's really a question of I talk a lot about addressing disinformation or making sure that the rules are fit for purpose, but we do have existing rules, and we need to make sure that they're enforced and that they're applied where there is wrongdoing and where there are public wrongs. And you're getting at the same challenge in many ways when it comes to deepfakes or misrepresentation and really privacy breaches. There, I mean, uh, you can't just impersonate someone. You can't steal someone's identity. You can't misrepresent. Like there are wrongs here, and sometimes it's an enforcement challenge. Sometimes it is, though. Um, we do need more systemic rules to say. So I've always thought we need companies where there's a mandatory risk assessment on what they're deploying. There's then obligations to mitigate those risks and take reasonable precautions and take reasonable steps to mitigate risks. And then ideally, because you and I can't be putting rules in place where there's uh, ideally you want a third party, either agency or you want audit, researchers, you want some audit function to be able to look in and see what is actually happening. Are they properly identifying material risks? Are they properly taking action? That's more akin to what the EU has in terms of a broader AI framework. We have yet to get there, though.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think it's an interesting conversation that we need to have in Canadian society about what it is that we accept and what we don't accept. I think your point about like, why is it up to parents to, determine what's acceptable for their kids to see when, when we have broadcasting, like it's on TV or radio, we have pretty clear guidelines about what's acceptable viewing, what's not acceptable viewing. But we don't when it comes
Yeah.
into streaming or when it comes to what's on YouTube or whatnot. And I don't know why we trust these companies to do that responsibly, because so far we actually haven't seen men be responsible. Right.
We are not going to find a single instance of a company that doesn't prioritize the dollar first. And of course. And so for a time, that meant embracing safety. But as soon as governments walked away from prioritizing safety, particularly the American administration walked away from that, then the companies quickly followed suit because then it just became a cost. And so, yeah, we can't leave it to the companies. We do need rules that are fit for purpose. I even think like, does your 8-year-old ever play Roblox?
No, I don't
Okay.
know.
Ah, man. So like, but there's an example where it's like you need default rules
Yeah.
that are age appropriate. And the UK has a model along these lines. The California has moved down this road. Age appropriate design rules. When companies are designing a service that they know is going to be used by kids, they need to make sure that the design is age appropriate. And a real simple example, it shouldn't be that I as a parent have to police every single little game that might be on that platform. I should be able to say I'm going to whitelist certain games, and that's like just more rules that I'm able to decide for my kids, but also then default rules that are, if I don't have the time to look over everything all the time, the default rules I know are going to mostly be keeping my kids safe. But we don't even have age appropriate design.
Yeah. No, I know. And this is something you and I talked about a lot over the years, right? And I mean, for me, it's been a real frustration that we haven't been able to move forward with something that is going to keep kids and people safe in Canada. A big part of that is, the conservative position on these things. But, I'll admit too, maybe we haven't gotten everything right from the Liberal
Yeah.
wall there. But the fact that we're not even having a mature conversation about it, I think is what's really concerning to me. And certainly when I talk to parents and people, like they're really worried about how do you keep your kids safe online? I mean, I was in the UK a couple of weeks ago and their conversation on AI is so much further ahead of where we are as well. And, I think it's one of those things. I was at the dais at TMU last week talking to them about AI, and it's interesting to hear different experts' opinions on it. But, there's this possibility where you could have AI that potentially, wipes out a whole swath of potential jobs,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things that they said that I thought was really interesting is they're like, okay, let's say you're a senior partner in a law firm. And instead of having, junior lawyers doing the research, you have AI doing it. Maybe that's a better use of your time. Maybe it's more efficient, etc. Then you don't have the pipeline of anyone coming up to be that senior lawyer. And so there's just all these things that like we haven't thought about or we're not talking about. And the technology is moving so quickly that Like, we need to get on top of it.
And governments are notoriously reactive
Yeah.
and not so proactive. I say this across party stripes. This tends to be the case. We really can't afford to allow that to be the case in this instance, where there's a safety consideration. The concern you just articulated is around a young person who is a recent graduate, and this is why it comes up on campus visits. It'll be a primary question to say, how am I going to be looked after? I'm already struggling. Housing is worse than what my parents experienced. My education's more expensive, and now job opportunities, which there's always already stress. The number of resumes that people are sending out and not getting offers back, and now you're saying a technology might eliminate a whole swath of entry-level jobs in certain sectors, and then there's no easy answer to this because it is almost sector-specific in some ways. But certain jobs are more at risk than others, and there will be transitions for some people who are in those jobs today. But for young people who are looking to get into those entry-level, it's tough.
Yeah. I mean, but it's the question of, like, I always say this: governments legislate in the rearview mirror, right? Like, we only legislate or regulate what we know has happened. We don't know what's coming. And somehow we're in a moment where technology is kind of leapfrogging us and where we are. And I feel that we as Canada, the world, really is quite unprepared for this. And we need to be having a deeper conversation about how we want to use this technology and in what ways. And I think, that one of the points you made at the beginning is that it has the potential to unleash a ton of economic power. But for who?
Yeah.
Right? And for how many? And what does that mean for the rest of us, for all of us? And so I think this is the conversation we need to be having, because we actually do have a moment to put some guardrails around what we're doing so that we can unleash the power of AI to assist us and to make all of our lives better, as opposed to making it really great for a very select few.
So this is interesting because I do think when we were first elected in the late of 2015, there was this overriding emphasis on fairness. And I think that is a core ethos of liberal politics at its core, and questions of dignity and making sure people are looked after. And you talked about how all of us benefit from government policies, which is, I think, the right way of putting it. At the same time, I think it's also, good liberal politics to ensure we embrace efficiency and ensure we embrace cutting red tape where it doesn't benefit the public interest and it's just getting in the way of doing business, and having a strong focus on the economy. And I think right now we are living in a moment where a focus on economic resilience and the trade war is overriding. And yet we don't want to lose that more progressive element of making sure that there is that emphasis on fairness and dignity and that we're all looked after. And so do you think we're getting the balance right? How do you think in this particular moment we can hold on to that idea of fairness?
I don't know why they would be an either or, right? I think a core liberal principle is that fairness is embedded into the actions that we take as a party, as government, as people, right? And so for me, yes, obviously the trade war is a priority here. The very real economic challenges that we're facing, like the war in Iran that the United States and Israel have, started, is something that all of us.
Well planned, though. Very well planned. Yeah.
Anybody's
No comment.
nice. But these are really big issues that we're dealing with. But that doesn't mean that gender equity and equality shouldn't be part of our response. In fact, they should be a core part of how we respond to it, because otherwise we're just going to perpetuate inequalities. And, by God, it falls it that speak for you, but you got into politics because we want to try to make things better. We want to try to make things, fairer and, more equitable, and to make, all of us more prosperous, right? Like that's the reason. That's the, like, it's on that. That's the motivation to do this job, is to try to create a better community, better country for everyone. And so for me, when we are, focused on the economy, well, the economy includes everybody, right? The economy is about people at the end of the day, right? That do they have a good, decent job? Are they able to buy the necessities that they need? Are they able to provide for their children in a way that's going to give them opportunity? And so for me, all of that should be totally embedded with fairness, equity, and justice.
It's it's tough. So people don't take it out of context. Like, there's no question when you look at the alternatives and you look at the seriousness of the prime minister in this moment in time. There's no doubt he's the right person, I think, to respond on behalf of Canada to these global challenges. Don't love the Iran statement. I think they walked it back in some ways. Bit convoluted. It's not the finest moment, but generally, that aside, generally speaking, uh, the right person at the right time for Canada, no doubt. And yet, if I was to be constructively critical, I would say I don't know. The economic focus is in some ways so singular. The focus on defense spending, the focus on these are all important elements of what we need to do to build a more resilient country, and knowing that the relationship with the United States may not be the same ever again, and we'll see how the Republican Party is in a post-Trump world at some point. But uh, I don't know that that question of equality looms as large as it maybe could and should.
I think you're right. Right. Like we certainly don't hear about it. And I think, that is one way to approach things. But from my perspective, and I think what Canadians expect of us is they expect that we're liberals, right? And they expect that every response that we have is it does include fairness, right? And it does try to lift all boats as fast as possible. Look, I think prime ministers in a impossible situation, right? This is a really difficult economic moment for the country. I would argue that on the one hand, it's possible that our relationship with the United States is irrevocably changed. However, being here in Burlington in Southern Ontario, when I visit businesses, you know, 50 to 85 to 95% of their business is in the United States.
Yeah.
You know, you drive an hour and you're in the United States. Like,
Yeah.
even if the relationship has changed, we're still going to have a relationship with them, and we have to have an economic relationship for fun. Even if
Of
we were,
course.
are going to increase exports to other parts of the world to try to protect our economy, which is something that, by the way, we started back in 2016, 2017.
Oh, the trade deals that are on, like, a good friend of mine from Oxford, he's now works on the EU side, responsible for trade with Canada and the US.
Yeah.
And right now, the job is taking advantage of a trade deal that was put in place
Yeah.
under the Trudeau administration, right? Like, we had free trade with the EU, and now it's like, how do we make the most of that together?
Yeah, the late Jim Farr, our former colleague who passed away when he was Minister of International Trade, he used to say, the government's job is to build the bridge, right? What comes to trade deals, but now we also have to help companies walk across that bridge, and I think that's kind of the stage where
Yeah.
we're at right now.
Yeah, and EU, CPTPP, like,
Yeah.
there were deals put in place, and now it's less a question of there are no doubt additional deals with other countries that are potentially on the table, but as much as anything, it's how do we make the most of the deals that are there?
Well, and to just going back to your point, like, I mean, I think when even though there's a focus on kind of like the hard economics, I don't think you can forget the softer economics, right? Like, if you don't include the social infrastructure, kind of the other part it doesn't work as well, right? Like,
Yeah.
part of what makes Canada so successful is that we found this balance between, like the individual prosperity and the collective good. And we have to be able to do both of those things. And so, like, I mean, look, I'll talk about childcare, so you can spot there. But, it is a really smart economic policy, right? Like, in Ontario alone, a year after we signed the agreement, 100,000 more women joined the workforce. Now, we can't make the direct, point that that was the cost. There's pretty strong,
Sure.
correlations that's there. And it's one of those things that, okay, well, heaven forbid we end up in a situation where, we do have a lot of job losses in Canada because of what's going on in the United States or ergo the world. We need that social infrastructure there to underpin people, to give them the opportunity to reskill, to find a new job, to enter
Oh, for sure.
into something else.
Yeah.
So, from my perspective, like, making those investments, sustaining those investments on the social side of things only supports the economic growth that we want to maintain and to grow even further.
Yeah, I mean, you've heard me say this in caucus. I've said it publicly as well. But when I was talking about the budget, one concern I had with deficit financing a tax cut, for example, is when you are deficit financing that kind of consumption at scale, and the tax cut was significant through $26 billion spent over 5 years, you do make it more difficult then to have the fiscal firepower to respond in a moment that requires it.
Oh, totally. And I mean, I think like we lived through COVID, you know, and if we think about, you know, when people talk about the debt that we have of a deficit, I mean, part of that is because we literally sustained the economy through a shutdown, through one of the worst public health crises that we have, well, that hopefully we will ever face in our lifetimes. But
no
when it's
comparison.
right.
Exactly.
And I mean, we literally sustained people through the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, businesses through the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, through the Canada Emergency Business um, Benefit. You know, all of these things that we need to have the fiscal firepower to do that, right? And I mean, the on the one hand, what the Prime Minister is doing right now is trying to kind of pre-stimulate the economy with all of the investments, particularly in defense, to kind of shore up for what a big economic shock could be. So I understand where he's doing that, but you can't neglect the social side of things. You know, one of the programs that I'm passionate about is the National School Food Program. So in the 1930s, most of our peers in the OECD in the Great Depression put in school food programs because they realized that it going hungry, and that was one way to kind of get them through a really difficult economic time. Canada decided not to do that. We're one of the only OECD countries that didn't have a national school food program. And so I'm really happy that we have a start, but quite frankly, it's not enough, right? Like it's not a full program yet.
Yes.
You know? And so what we should be doing is investing in those kinds of supports that are going to be there for people when times are good, but also when times are tough, in addition to making sure that those jobs are there. But, you know, we're in a really uncertain world. And my belief is that government is there to be a force for good in people's lives. And when I think about what the job of the government is, it's to protect people, to keep them safe. That could be our borders, but that might also be economically, make sure we don't have people that are going hungry, all of these things that we actually have power to do and that we could do, but we have to be intentional about doing it.
Do you think we talk public safety online? I think there's a turn towards a public safety agenda that sometimes frustratingly echoes a more conservative agenda, but I actually think we could lean into public safety in other ways, including protecting kids online more usefully than we are. When it comes to the promise of equality and the promise of defending and supporting and expanding social programs, I think really the commitment is almost we're going to focus on clear-eyed, focus on trade, focus on economy, focus on defense, but we're going to protect existing growth in programs in childcare and to a degree pharma care and other benefits. We did see an expansion to a degree of the Groceries Essentials Benefit, reformed GST tax credit, but topped up a bit.
But that's not as meaningful as a full national school food program.
Well, I was the National School Food Program. I found interesting. We promised to make it permanent, but then when you look under the hood, it's like, well, we already had funding in place until 2030. So, I mean, there's no new money there. But again, it's protecting what is there. It strikes me. You talk childcare, I would talk housing, but I mean, it strikes me that one avenue for really leaning into more progressive politics is really delivering affordable housing at scale. That is within the ambit of what we've promised and so possible. Its delivery is everything. And then the other avenue, I think, for more progressive politics that is potentially on the table, although some elements of the Alberta Emory maybe make this more difficult. But there's a professor at U of T, he's a brilliant guy in nutritional sciences, David Jenkins, but he's the inventor of the glycemic index. He's like he's a brilliant guy. And I've been back and forth with him, and he really cares about climate and all things planetary protection and future forward. And he sort of talked to a number of people at U of T who are climate focused, and he got back to me and say, you know, we have a list of ideas, but we really just think the Prime Minister needs to follow through on the things he wrote about. And I think a lot of people voted for us, voted for Mark Carney because he's steady, stable hand for the economy in this moment, for sure. I think a lot of people voted because they knew him to be an ambassador on climate. And there's another, it's uncertain today, but there's another area where I think he could lean in, the government could lean in. And in addition to affordable housing, climate is another area where uncertain how what it could look like, but there's another area where he has credibility on it and he could pursue that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge area for us. I mean, we had such a unique voter coalition in the last election, right? We had a lot of folks who obviously Trump was their number one issue and the trade war was their number one issue. We had a huge number of women who supported us, who, believe in making sure that we continue to have a progressive country. And then we had a lot of, kind of more progressive lefty leaning folks. And then a lot of people who voted for us because they read Mark Kearney's book and they believe in fighting climate change and they really want to see that transition happen. So I think there's huge space there. We're supposed to be coming out with our nature strategy. So I'm keen to see how that goes. There's a lot that we can do in protecting our natural environment, but then there's also like questions about, okay, well, what does you actually voted against C5. I didn't, but you did.
Yes.
And but that like go on with your maverick, like it's not part of the courts. But I think it'll be really interesting, like when we do actually start rolling out nature projects, how many of those are clean technology, how many of those are actually clean energy projects, and what does that look like in the transition here in Canada and around the world? I mean, the talking about the war in Iran, I've had lots of conversations with people about, okay, like, clearly the world is still very dependent on oil. But is this also a moment for us to be talking about what a transition looks like to more sovereign energy production here at home so we're not as, tied and reliant to global oil prices around the world? I mean, like I drive a hybrid, but I filled up my tank and I was like, whoa,
Oh yeah.
this is like
Oh, yeah.
this is way more than, and
Yeah, we just drove to the farm and
Yeah.
you're looking at, you know, cheaper in Sarnia than in Toronto, but it's still expensive in both cities. And it's that has real
Yeah.
costs. It's why, Wab Kinew was out there saying like the biggest threat to our day-to-day economy is Donald Trump. And like look,
Yeah.
and he's pointing to the war in Iran.
But it's affecting everybody, right? I mean, sorry, and just going back to your point on housing, I mean, like we know if we can give people stable, quality, affordable housing, that we can do a lot for them, right?
Of course.
Huge
Oh yeah, it's the foundational.
foundational.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, look, we've got Build Canada Homes. We've made big commitments there. I think we need to make sure that the government delivers.
Yeah, it's a scale question. I think on climate and on housing, there's credibility and there's a path.
Yeah.
But when you look at the scale on defense, and now the question on defense will be, can you get dollars out the door to things that are going to be constructive and useful? And a lot of what happened in the Harper era, for example, was big commitments that were lapse dollars. And so it's really making sure, how do we actually make sure there's a real spend there within our commitment?
Up in including companies.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Like that's been my frustration of the local MP is that, we have the ITBs, the industrial, whatever they are, benefits that are supposed to be the equivalent of spending here at
Right.
home. And yet you have so many manufacturers like here
Yeah.
and around who could actually provide whatever specs they're looking for at D&D, but the foreign company that we've hired is using their supply chain outside of Canada. And so I think the real question is going to be like, are those benefits actually?
That's a good point. Yeah. So it's how do we actually get the spend out the door, but also in the right places to benefit the Canadian economy? And then housing and climate is how do we actually scale to a place where it's commensurate to these other investments? Progressive politics. So we talk federally.
Yeah.
And obviously, in this moment, federal politics looms large and incredibly important. I mean, even you look at the auto sector, even though it's predominantly in Ontario, overwhelmingly so, it took a federal government to take a leadership role in delivering an auto strategy, which leads me to the lackluster leadership, if I'm being polite, at the provincial level. Now, I think you would be a great leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, and I try to convince you of this. But you politely declined. I remember, we were walking. I'm joining you in Burlington, but you were kind to join me in Beaches East York, and we were walking along the boardwalk, and you know what I liked at the time, it was a hard no when I was trying to convince you, and then obviously I wasn't alone. There were lots of people, rightly so, because you're great. And so you then were like, I'm seriously considering it. And then you disappointed many of us and said you weren't doing it. And but in saying that, you also had some pointed criticisms, and rightly so, of the incompetence and self-dealing of Doug Ford. And I do think there's a moment where this is the largest province in our country. So much depends upon serious leadership in the province of Ontario. It is completely missing. And so uh, where do you see change happening in Ontario, and what kind of change do you think needs that? Because you obviously, even though you declined, you were happy to say that like enough is enough.
Yeah, well, I'm a resident of Ontario. Like, I live here. My kids go to school here.
I have eyes.
Here, I live here, right? So, I mean, like, come on. Yeah, look, there's a lot going in the province that I find really frustrating, and I am excited, for the change that's going to happen and for progressive change in Ontario. I'm going to go back to public safety for a second, because I think that's actually an area where things need to change in Ontario. The Premier Doug Ford talks a big game, but he doesn't deliver, right? Like, when we talk about bail reform, well, there at Maplehurst, there were 3 to a bunk, right? Because he canceled new jail programs
Yes.
that the previous Liberal government was going to fill. He has let courthouses crumble, right? The courthouse in Burlington, the Crown was telling me that it's closed more days than it's open, right?
The delays that happen in the administration of justice are a direct consequence of incompetent management by a Conservative government under Ford. And the outcomes, then they look at them and they go, well, there was a stay of prosecution. Well, there was someone released by this judge, and he goes after the judge, or he goes after the federal Liberal government and taking responsibility and action.
Yeah. So what I think he needs to change is
Lots of there.
a lot there. But I think you need leadership that takes accountability.
Yeah.
Right? Takes responsibility for their action.
Yeah.
And, I'll also be very honest. I mean, at the federal level, we didn't do a good job of clearly showing whose responsibility this is, right? There were some things that we need to do on bail reform. Absolutely. But we don't administer justice in this country, or we do, but not in the areas that he's talking about. So, like, that's one of the big issues. He's really good at blaming everybody else for his decisions. Like, they are actually his decisions. Like, he, as the Premier, decided not to fund a new jail, not to fund renovating a courthouse. He, as the Premier, has decided. Let's talk about OSAP. OSAP has punched through. I like taking taxi to the airport.
Yeah.
And I chit chat with the taxi driver, and normally we talk about the weather, we talk about Donald Trump, who knows what. Do you know they've all talked to me about OSAP? Every single one of them, because their kids, they're worried now that the kids aren't going to be able to go to university, that Doug Ford's changes to OSAP taken away the Canadian dream, right? Like, this guy literally told me, one of the taxi drivers told me he was thinking he might need to sell his house that his kids can go to university.
Wow.
Because they were going to be relying on OSAP. And so, like, these things, like, I think he's gotten so arrogant that he thinks he can do whatever. Right. And I think OSAP is kind of like the beginning of the straw that breaks the camel's back, where people go, no, enough is enough. The other one that I hear about so much is speed cameras.
Yep.
Right. Like, because they're he's taking them away from school zones. Like, why do you want people speeding in a school zone? Why do you want that? And the most interesting argument I heard was from like a local bakery here in Burlington, you guys. Because typically he's a conservative. He votes for Ford. And I was picking up dinner one day, and he said to me, what's this guy doing with speed cameras? I don't want a police officer sitting watching for people who are speeding. I want him out there on the street going to get back gas.
Yes.
Right? That's a conservative argument for speed cameras, right? Because it's an efficiency argument.
I actually also don't think it's overly. So I'm running in this nomination in Scarborough Southwest, and I was speaking to a father in Cliffside.
Yeah.
And people are speeding through Cliffside to get to the GO station, especially during rush hour. But families with kids, everyone's concerned, but families with kids especially so. And he mentioned when he threw it in one of the Facebook chats, it blew up because a lot of people share this concern. I was talking about, like, I don't think it's overly complicated. So you don't need to catch someone going 53 at 9 p.m. at night when things are completely vacant. If you do that, you lose public support for, and then that's why Ford is trying to weaponize this. Like, oh, this is outrageous. He's trying to come at it from a populist perspective, but there's an easy way to square the circle. You go, okay, well, we want to make sure people are protected and safe. And so, especially in school zones, especially during certain times, there's going to be high alert and enforcement. And we're not going to catch people a little bit over the limit in areas at 9 p.m. It's like we can do both, guys, and have thoughtful, smart policy, not just reactionary. You've spent money. They even spent money on it. This is like he's running against himself on this and tearing things out. And actually, I think the recurring theme, I get this all the time from folks in Lambton County, but the feeling like this guy just wants to be mayor of Toronto. He's like overruling municipal decisions in Toronto, and he's just trying to, whether it's bike lanes or speed cameras or whatever it is, or interfering in the election, whatever it is, it's just like, does this guy want to be premier? Because it doesn't seem like he wants to do the job of premier.
So I would say too, Ontario is a very well-for-profits, right? But we need to make smart decisions with our finances, right? Like Aphrodite. But there's no reason why we shouldn't have access to the best, most timely healthcare in the world.
Yeah.
There's no reason why our education system, both elementary, secondary, post-secondary, shouldn't be absolutely top-notch, right? Like there's absolutely no
Correct.
It's only decisions that are being made by the provincial government that are inhibiting that. And in my mind, like that's what people want. They just want a government that works,
Yes.
right? Like they just they don't necessarily want to see the premier every single day. They just want to know that if they have an emergency, they're going to go to the hospital and they're going to get treated in a time.
Completely agree. I could not agree.
Kids are going to get a good education, and that when they go to university, they're going to be able to afford it, and they're not going to be saddled with debt for the rest of their lives, like you see in the United States, right? And they want a good job to go to. So
Yes, opportunity, especially for their kids, they want the opportunity. And then it's a question of OSAP. It's a question of housing. If you're laying on another $3,500 a year in debt, you're pushing affordable education away from people, and then therefore you're pushing opportunity away from them.
Yeah.
If you're not building homes at scale and with speed, this is where I really like the Carney message of delivering on the basics like housing with speed and scale. The province needs to lean into that. Instead, we've seen multiple pieces of legislation upended certainty in the housing sector. They've not been part of the solution. They've been part of the problem, actually, unfortunately. And so getting the basics right on delivering opportunity. Dignity is the other question, a question of fairness. That's missing. And then this piece of honesty and integrity. I think this is sort of everything when we talk about trust in politics. It's we get the virtue signaling on pouring out a bottle of Crown Royal, or we get the virtue signaling on the speed cameras in the wrong direction. But more than that, we're missing on the core question of accountability.
Yeah.
Take freedom of information.
Yeah.
Because he was losing a court decision where he's been doing business on his personal cell phone. And by the way, we should all be concerned about this, because this is the same guy who does business at weddings, and envelopes are passed hands around the Greenbelt. Like there's a history and track record here of self-dealing, and doing business on his personal cell phone. The information officer and then ultimately a court are saying, you're going to have to disclose this. And in response, he literally moves to change the law to avoid accountability. It's hard to imagine less honesty, less transparency, less integrity. And again, I don't think it's overly complicated. I think you're right. We need excellence in education. We need excellence in healthcare. We need to get the basics right. And from a values perspective, why the Liberals, I think why, like what we all deserve regardless of party politics, you want smart representation, you want fair representation, or more honest representation. And to your point, you want a government that works. And then to your earlier point, you want a government that works for everyone, not just friends, not just people who have written the right check, So and education's interesting. I wonder how if you get this feedback locally in Burlington, but the trustee piece has been a bit of chaos. The school I went to, my elementary school, my mom was the retired as the teacher there, actually, as the librarian there, but Bowmore, and it made international news actually at one point, because 2 teachers were fired. Why were they fired? Because for years, these 2 teachers had basically potted. So it was like, Karina, you're going to be responsible for teaching history and geography. I'm going to be responsible for math and science, and we just share a class. they decided, no, you can't do that. And it became this big blow up. And so they fired these 2 teachers. They ended up suspending another 8 teachers. At one point, the whole grade 7, 8 cohort did not have a regular teacher for over a week. And all the parent council had wanted was address concerns around safety and bullying. And then the whole thing exploded in chaos. It's just gross mismanagement and incompetence. When what do we need? We need excellence. We need, like, I'm a product of the public school system. I was able to be the first in my family to go to law school. I was able, first in my family to go to Oxford. Like, you want everyone to have that opportunity through the public school system. We want excellence. We want we don't want to have a government that gets in the way and wears it down and delivers mediocrity.
But I also just don't really understand why they want to have their fingers in the pie.
In everything. In everything.
Like, there are some things that, okay, if there's an issue, okay, I
course.
course, right? But they seem to be wanting to create issues. And I think the question is why, right?
Yes.
But what I would say here,
That why question, by the way, is every single person you speak to, from principals to teachers to parents, they're all asking that question of why. Why are they interfering to make things worse? Is there some other goal here?
yeah, it's a good question. We don't have the answer.
Yeah.
But this is, I guess, going back to accountability. We need really strong opposition right now, right? And I think that is actually what has let Doug Ford be kind of so unfettered. Instead, like, we just haven't had strong opposition. And I think that's why we need a really strong Liberal Party right now, because the NDP hasn't been able to do it. Like, they just haven't been able to hold Doug Ford accountable. And like, this is where we need, Liberals who care about these things to be there in the legislature, holding them accountable and raising these issues and raising them effectively.
What do you think? I won't pitch you on it again, but in the lead up to 2015, we were both part of that renewal in our own ways. I was on the ground hustling a nomination. You represent your home community as well, and we all played a role in really getting off the sideline. We could be doing other things, and there's a sacrifice to this job, and it's, you throw yourself into it to help your community and to help make the most of things and to improve things. And because you say, at that point it was, if not now, when? Like, it's time to get off the sidelines and make a difference. And I feel like we are increasingly in that moment of, now is the time for change. Let's seize this moment in Ontario and deliver better, because we deserve better.
Yeah.
From a party perspective, though, there was a real movement in the lead up to 2015 of people joining the party for the first time. There was an excitement. There was, I think Trudeau, and I know by the end people had their frustrations, but and I think people will look fondly with some benefit of hindsight.
Elections.
And to that point, like, he brought people into politics. That commitment of empowering local parliamentarians is one reason I joined. The commitment to generational renewal is one reason I left law for politics. I'm sure you were attracted to run because there was this opportunity for renewal and building something.
That's the felt like from Nina Ace. Like, if we didn't stop Stephen Harper then, some of the changes he was making would have been irrevocable.
Sure.
And I kind of feel that way about Doug Ford now, whether healthcare, education, some of the environmental policies, right? Just the things that he's doing is that, like, if you give him, the Conservatives, another mandate, like, we're going to be experiencing some really terrible things. If you go back, I mean, I don't want to overblow things, but, like, you have to invest in public services. Otherwise, you get things like Walkerton, right? And, this is where this moment is so important, whether it's in our healthcare or our education, environmental infrastructure. Like, now is the moment to get involved, be part of that movement that is going to protect the things that we love and care about as Ontarians, but also to make them better, right? And so for me in 2015, like, that's what spoke to me. It was like, now is the moment to do it. And, and when I think about the big things, like, I wanted a government that believed in climate change, right? I wanted a government that cared about reconciliation. I wanted a government that was focused on the middle class. I wanted a government that was actually, like, listening to what people cared about. And I think, that's kind of the moment that Ontario finds itself in right now. And so that's where the rebuild happens, right? It's about getting people energized and excited about what the possibility of the future of Ontario looks like.
Yeah.
Right.
And when it comes to that rebuild, are there, like, I'm in the midst of this. So my last question is advice for me.
Yeah, I think it's reach out far and open your arms up because, that's the secret sauce of the Liberal Party has always been it's a big tent party,
Yeah.
right? And it's about bringing people in with diverse perspectives. I mean, we've always been a centrist party, a bit more of a bent, to the progressive side than the progressive conservatives. And I think it's about building that you want to have people who represent every facet of who we are as Ontarians. And one of the things that I admired and respected so much about Trudeau is that he did bring in people with different perspective,
Yeah.
and he encouraged that debate. And I think that's what really good leaders do is they're not afraid to hear from people who are contrarians, who push them, who challenge them. And I think that's what will make somebody who can bring people together. And I think you have to make it exciting, right?
Yeah.
And you have to make it something like if you don't have cold, then what do you have? Right? Like why do you and I, well, you not so much anymore, but like why do we go to Ottawa for 4 days every week, right? To like fight the good fight and try and leave our families behind because we're trying to build something, right? We're trying to build something better. And I think that's what is going to bring people along is what is your vision for us?
And I think that the question of what gets you up in the morning, and it really is how do you make the biggest difference? And for all the reasons you articulated, I think the biggest difference we can make in many ways as Liberals is helping to rebuild the provincial party and delivering change at Queen's Park because we don't have a government that works. And I think you're right. Like I said from the outset, I wasn't interested in doing this again, but for being able to build a team. I think partly as a consequence of having a reputation as someone who has had my own voice in politics. Other people who want that same kind of politics are attracted to it. People who are not overly partisan sometimes, people who have been counselors, etc. But I think increasingly the idea here is we're always going to be leader centric. I get it. It is just the natural bent to our politics. But how do we build a team that isn't just fit for purpose to win a leadership? How do we build a team that is ready to win and to govern together in a serious way? And if it feels like we're on the right track, but it's just that relentless team building that is essential.
I mean, if you go back to 2015, like it was team Trudeau.
Exactly.
And it was a focus on the team.
Exactly.
Right. And
Exactly.
there were people who, you could identify who brought something, right? Like Bill Morneau on the economy, Wilson Raybould on Indigenous issues.
Oh, you're hitting all the highlights.
Catherine McKenna on environments and climate change. But there were people who brought something in their own.
No, I agree. Completely agree.
Abilities to the table that demonstrated that not only was this a team that could win, but it was a team that could govern.
Yeah, and it's also what brings some excitement to it. That is like, come join the team. Look at the team we're building. And that is the overriding message that we're out to deliver. Anyway, thank you for joining.
Thanks for coming.
I'm very nice to be here at Beach Coffee Co. So I'm glad. I hear this is a new spot that you're gonna open soon, but you are a regular at another location.
I'm a very regular at Beach Coffee Co.
And I will see you in Ottawa.
Yeah, great. Sounds good. Thanks, Rob.